everyone. I'm Earl, the General Manager of Anti-Doping at World Rugby. This presentation will just take you briefly through how World Rugby have looked to implement the international standard for education. We see the implementation of the ISC very much as a two-stage process. So the first stage being the implementation of the policy, what we're required to do by the standard. So that's define our education pool, produce and evaluate an education plan, and ensure that we do our event and pre-event education. And also critically for the framework, ensuring that our national federations meet their national level education obligations and that they are supported to deliver education and support education within their organisations. The second stage is when that framework is in place, that we use the science to inform our practice and to bridge the gap between research, policy and practice. So our intention is that we use what we know from the research to inform the programme design. So that would be looking at the capability, opportunity and motivation within our playing population to ensure that we cover off the risks and ensure that our education helps players to be clean, teaches them the right knowledge and competencies, that we understand the player pathway and where the opportunities may come and where the risks may come and what might increase doping risk along the player pathway. Also motivation, that ensuring that we focus on the support framework and developing the support framework, not just the players, so that they have good values and we can create positive team structures. And we also need a programme that fits the specifics of our sport. So we know we need to address the perceptions within the sport that size equals performance and image, and also safety, that players are concerned about their size being a protection against getting hurt. We know we need to teach safe supplementation to make sure that our players know how to identify risk when they are using supplements, and to develop good team norms and a strong positive environment around the player. So in terms of planning our programme, where did we start with our considerations? Well, it's important to state at the outset that we already had an extensive education programme in place. All participants entering into World Rugby competitions had to complete our anti-doping e-learning as a mandatory entry requirement. We also provided face-to-face education for teams in their own language, in their own country, before they entered into our competitions. So there was already a structure in place before we started. But who are our international level participants? Well, the important thing for us to consider was just the size of the pool, because rugby has a lot of elite level participants. Each of our 15 teams would have upwards of 30 players plus their support personnel. So we have to be realistic with the definition of our education pool and how we define the individual tiers, because we can't give everything to everyone. The next consideration was, how do we reach them? We're an international federation, so our participants are spread all over the world. And the important thing about rugby is that our game is a club-based game, or certainly the players spend the majority of their time during the year at their clubs. So we needed to come up with a programme that could work and be delivered at national level. So it was important that we work closely with NARDOs and that we ensure that our national federations have the capability to be able to deliver education for elite players at national level. The next question was what we should deliver. Now, World Rugby have always produced sport-specific resources. We've just produced our own e-learning program. We have face-to-face lesson plans, and we produce a lot of educational films for players. So we intend that our program will be a combination of sport-specific resources, but also national-specific resources, because we recognise that it's important that players understand national situation with regards to things like medications and supplements. So we foresee a hybrid model that uses the NARDO's expertise, but that also uses our sport-specific materials. So it was important, again, that we've talked to NARDO's in the development of this program, and we've met with the majority of NARDO's from our top 10 teams over the last 6 months to try and make sure that we're coordinated with what they're doing. Then we had to look at who was best placed to deliver the education, particularly the face-to-face. We have a small network of educators, but we clearly can't do this worldwide without NARDO, so we will be relying on the NARDO Educator Network and trying to educate people within our national federations so that they have the capacity to deliver and expand the educator network. There may obviously be situations where a NARDO doesn't have capacity to deliver, so our worldwide educator network, small as it is, will be used to try and plug those gaps and hopefully make sure that we can have consistent education delivery worldwide. And then the final consideration was just how we evaluated success, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but clearly part of the ISE is that in implementing our program, we make sure that we're integrating feedback, measurement and evaluation into our program. Our education pool is very much based around our testing pool, as that's how international level athletes are defined within our regulations. So clearly our main focus will be on our players, our elite players, but we'll also be putting a lot of focus towards coaches, team managers and physios and doctors and strength and conditioning coaches, as they provide the main support structure around the player and create the player's environment. Not included will be parents who we don't have a regular contact with, and agents where we don't have a formal structure within rugby. So it's not that we're not interested in those two groups, but we won't be providing any specific education for them. So for that pool, we need to define what types of education our participants are going to receive. And we've got 5 main areas that we will be delivering as part of our program. E-learning will provide the baseline. So we have a new e-learning program in numerous languages, and every one of our elite athletes and participants will be required to complete that. On top of that, we'll have targeted face-to-face education. And we recognize that the face-to-face is the key part of the program. This is the area where the combi stuff comes in, the capability and providing players with capability and improving their knowledge, but also delivering values education so that we can try and raise the level of values across our participants. The e-handbook is very much a basic resource. That's a printed resource, so we know that that's just there as a support function. But also key is that World Rugby has a worldwide training network where we train coaches, we train referees, doctors. So already prior to the ISE, we had e-learning, anti-doping e-learning as part of a course prerequisite. We will now introduce specific education into the face-to-face element of those courses. So the idea being, again, that we can help with a secure network for players by helping to train those around them, and hopefully we can then manage the doping motivation aspect of our risk by having a more informed and a more educated support staff. And finally, we have our outreach program. We've always conducted outreach at our major events, and we will continue to do that. The only difference from the ISE being that will be a more formalized structure, and we will deliver those at our major events. So what will success look like for us? Well, on a very basic level, in terms of the simple delivery of the program, we will be looking at whether the education plans have been successfully delivered, whether outreach has been delivered, whether we've received all the feedback that we've expected, and that will feed into the design of the program for next year. However, that basic evaluation doesn't tell us a great deal about our program and doesn't use a huge amount of science and data to really get behind where our issues are. So we'll be using targeted education as much as we can. We've embedded metrics into our e-learning program, which will help us to identify where a particular team or group of players might be weak on a certain topic. And then when they conduct their face-to-face session, we will ensure that they have targeted education on that topic. And we have developed lesson plans that are rugby specific and will identify known issues from research within our sport. We'll also be embedding research into our e-learning, so we'll hopefully have a captive audience for that, and we'll be tracking the knowledge scores and evaluating those within the e-learning. We'll continue to conduct field research. World Rugby has a research grant program of which anti-doping topics are included, and we conduct research regularly with our under 20 level around our World Championships, and that will continue to allow us to continue to understand that population. We're also going to try and establish education histories for our participants, which will probably be a challenge, but we're going to try and track every education face-to-face session that they attend and all e-learning that they complete, so that we can have an individual history or passport for each participant. We'll continue to collect feedback from face-to-face sessions, so we can identify what the participant experience of those sessions is like. And most importantly, just to bring it back to this group, we will continue to try and implement emerging practice into our program, and we rely on the Clean Sport Alliance and those within it to help inform what we do. And it's important to note that when we were initially establishing our policy, we did have help from Sue Backhouse and Kelsey Erickson in that development, so that was an important part of us establishing what we needed to do. And that's it. That's a very whistle-stop tour of what we're planning to do. I hope that's been useful for you, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to answer any questions later. Thank you.